sponsors, Debbie, Jay, and Marie. Today for our lead, I have asked my old friend and sponsor, one of my sponsors, Tom Schlund. I've known Tom for 31 and a half years already, or 31 and 3/4 years, and Tom's been a teacher, a friend, a partner. He's one of the good guys in AA that taught me about the steps, and one of the guys that taught me about the steps, and taught me about the program, and he's been a good mentor and a good friend over all these years, I don't know, his home group is Cork and Bottle. Okay, that's the group I go to too. So I'll give you Tom Schlund from Cork and Bottle.
It's going to be too high maintenance. I love the way you read, Marie. I really do. I guess after 35 years, you end up here. And apparently, as Mark said, I've had a chance to help him along with many other sponsors. So it's some of us need more help than others. My name is Tom Schlund. I'm an alcoholic. And would you help me start with the serenity prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. All right. When I first walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, the last thing I ever expected to be doing was leading a meeting of people who have been sober for 30 years or more. Because I didn't plan on being sober for more than 30 days. This was not where I belonged. It's where I ended up, but it really wasn't where I thought I belonged. And because my thoughts walking in these doors were, if I just stay cool long enough, she'll back off. I was ushered in here. My wife kind of put down an ultimatum that the only way back into my house is going to be through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had to thank our neighbor across the street for that, because she's the one that got here to a couple of Al-Anon meetings. Taught her detachment and taught her how to put it to use. I've been drinking for years. I've been causing problems for years. And I had never been lonely like I was after she learned what she was supposed to do. And loneliness isn't good for me. And fear isn't good for me. And I was afraid I was just going to lose everything that I claimed was important to me. I claimed it was important to me because, thank God for AA and the 12 steps, I found out that when I was drinking, nothing was important to me. Nothing but drinking. And you couldn't have told me that when I first walked through the doors. Because I had a denial system that just was on high all the time. But when I look back at what it took for my wife to get to the point where she just couldn't stand to be around me anymore, I was amazed. My idea of what I was all about was 180 degrees off. I was, for a while, I was the pillar of my church. I was, and there was just so much in my background that enabled me to say I'm okay, and to understand the insanity of alcoholism. Took me close to a year of coming through these doors, not drinking, and wondering what I was going to be able to. And she wasn't budging. I guess the best thing about it is that if you come in and out of the doors of AA for a year and you do it often enough, 3, 4, 5 times a week, because I had no place else to go. You hear enough about alcoholism, and you meet enough people that didn't think they should have been here either. And you get enough people to start showing you who you are. I think it's hard to leave. It bit me down to a point where, so I used to not necessarily compare, but I used to just get mad. I'd see people come in the rooms, and within, weeks or a month, they're smiling and they're telling everybody how great things are going for them, and they're back to work and they're punching their time clock again, and they're things are looking up, and that wasn't happening for me. And the longer I stayed, the less it happened. I just couldn't figure it out. I had a sponsor, and I credit him for saving my life, my family, and everything that I have today, because he understood me. I met him in another 12-step program. I decided to become a compulsive gambler because it was easier than admitting I was an alcoholic. It really was. And there had been a point where I had to do something, and that was the path I took for a while. And the best thing happened to me in GA was I met Chuck. Again, it was just a result of one of those times where things got so tough at home that something had to be done. And I guess my drunk-a-log is pretty much how those things progress. There used to be simple things, and they got more and more intense. And I'd go out, I could drink and cause trouble until my wife couldn't take it anymore. We'd have a great big fight. And then I would, do those temporary things. I'll show you. I'll pour this down the drain. I'll pour that down the drain. I'm never going to drink again. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have to drink. And then I would spend as much time as it took either trying not to drink or at least hiding my drinking. That's when I used to go to one bar. I go to different bars in those periods. See, if I went to a bar that I was familiar in, I could never leave. When I found out I went to a bar I'd never been to, I could have 1 or 2 beers and go home. The trouble is, if I went to that same bar 2 or 3 times, I was a regular. And all of a sudden there were people in that bar whose stories were more important to me than my family. There were things that I just could not afford to miss. By the time I stopped drinking, if I really got started, there were at least 9 or 10 places I had to stop to complete the circuit. Just to make sure that everybody knew I was still around and try to make sure I knew what was going on. because you didn't want to walk into a bar and not know what was going on. So we go through those things, and what would happen is if I just slowed down, I was home more often and apparently treated people a little different. And at some point in time, my wife would come back from the grocery store with a six-pack to reward me for not drinking. And we went through that cycle over and over and over and over again for years. And, so when I started talking about the family, we made the family sicker than we are. It took me a while, but I didn't understand what they meant. She didn't drink. She never drank. But she just sick us out. And we played that same game over and over and over again. She didn't know when to leave, and I didn't know when to come out. There's a guy that led a home group Thursday, and he talked about the invisible line. And you don't hear that as often as you used to, I don't think, but I remember when I first got here, I had to try to determine where my invisible line was. And my assumption was that it had to be somewhere within the previous year, because I hadn't been bad before then. And I keep tracking back to, maybe somebody, I hear a lead, somebody would mention something, and I would flash back to like 10 years back and say, damn, I did that. So I must have been, I must have crossed the line when I was 28. Then I hear another lead, and I say I had to cross the line when I was 20. Then I finally figured out that I crossed the line the first time I got drunk. First time I had the opportunity to drink alcoholically, I did. It was a New Year's Eve. I was 15 years old. Dad was having his New Year's Eve party. A buddy of mine from down the street, we're going to clean up because we had to do paper routes. And he cleaned up the house. I cleaned up every drop of liquor I could find. Every leftover glass that didn't have a cigarette butt in it. I mean, it was just crazy. And I finished up by guzzling probably what was a third of a bottle of every kind of brandy that was still left. And we went out to do newspapers. And I got sick, and I threw up, and my buddy had to bring me back to the house. Next thing I know, I'm under a cold water faucet. My dad's got my head under, and he says, and I was just miserable. And he looked at me. I was going to try to get upstairs to go to bed. He says, where do you think you're going? So I got to get some sleep. He looked at me, you got a bag of papers there that ain't been delivered yet. So I had to go out, drag around the neighborhood. Didn't remember a thing where I'd been. Went out in the backyard, burned the papers, and came back home. Problem solved. I never thought much about that until I was sober for a while. I said, that's the way I handle all my problems. I never tried to solve a problem when I was drinking. I just tried to eliminate them. I'm going to burn them up so nobody can see them and pretend they never happened. So I come back from that, and I'm ready to go to bed. My dad says, this is a holy day. You're Catholic. We're going to church. He took me, he elbowed me through a solemn high mass. And he brought me home, looked me in the eye, and he says, you look pretty miserable. You should probably go to bed. And that was the consequences of my first drink. And he was trying to teach me that I should not let alcohol take a priority in my life. to where it interferes with my obligations or responsibilities. And my brain just didn't work like his. I spent the rest of my drinking life trying to pretending that I was fulfilling responsibilities and obligations so that I could drink as much as I wanted to. And that's my drug habit. From that, I didn't become a daily drinker at 15. It took a while. But every time I had a chance to drink alcoholically, I drank alcoholically and I got drunk. And I always say there's one thought that never went through this head while I was drinking was, I've had enough, I think it's time to go home. It just didn't happen. What used to happen was I'd be sitting at the bar, and newly married, and there'd be something going on that I knew about, and my thought always was, I've got to get home, because if I don't, all hell's going to break loose, and I could drag myself away from a drink to get to something that was important enough to prove I was responsible. And then all of a sudden, there's 4 kids. They've got all these things they got to do. And I had to drag myself away from my drinks for first communions and baptisms and Indian gag meetings, and Tommy and I went through 3 years of Indian guys that had a pretty good time, because half the fathers in that tribe drank like I did. We'd go to campouts, coolers full of beer. Mike fell in kind of a straighter crowd than that, and I don't think we lasted more than a year and a half. Of course, one of the things that stopped that is he got hit by a car on the way home from school. The crossing guard said he flew about 25 feet. It was winter time. He had a heavy snorkel jacket on. He spent 10 days in the hospital, and incoherent in the hospital. He wasn't unconscious. He just didn't know what the hell was going on. And I remember my wife stayed up there the whole time. And I'd go up and visit on the way home from work. And then my sister-in-law was watching the kids. So I would stop at the bar to have a couple on the way home. And when you're got something like that going on in your life, the bar's a nice, compassionate place to be. I got more free drinks. People feeling sorry for me. I love people feeling sorry for me. And it was just crazy. I'd get home and at 11 o'clock at night, and it was, and my son's in the hospital, and that's the way I drank. When I walked into a bar, all bets were off. I remember I walked into a bar about 6 months. Mike came through that well. He's okay. We were really, really fortunate. But I remember walking into a bar about 6 months after that whole thing happened. The bartender asked me how my son was doing, and I couldn't figure out what the hell she was talking about. It was like it never happened. It had no value in my life. And these are things that my sponsor used to tell me, we're lucky the fog doesn't lift as soon as we walk through the door. He says, if everybody knew what they were really all about when they first come through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, there wouldn't be enough bridges in this town for everybody to jump off of at the same time. But for me, that's been the gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. It has forced me to understand what I'm capable of when I'm drinking. And it's not violent. I've never been in a decent bar fight. I've never been in jail. I've never had a DUI or an IVO or whatever the hell they call them now. Never. And it's not because I didn't drive drunk. I just never got caught. And I can remember waking up at 80 miles an hour on 480 coming home from work in Chagrin Falls and wondering how I got there. I still never got one, so I don't know. Maybe, yes. I don't know if that would have got me here faster or not. And it really doesn't make any difference. I got here. But as I said, as time went on, what really happened was there became less and less things that were important enough to drag me away from a drink. Some really important things would happen, and I could no longer say, I've got to leave. I couldn't leave. I was a prisoner. I just could not leave. So any little bit of support my wife might have had from me as a father or a husband or anything else just evaporated. And that's my story. I don't have any crazy drunk stories. Well, unless you call getting drunk at church crazy. I got so active at church, it was, I thought I was, on the right hand of. And we used to do renewals, which were a lot like doing 12-step weekends now, but it was intense stuff. And I remember, I was the leader of a lot of that stuff, and I helped people, truly helped people. But I got drunk. And it kept me away from the house. My wife could never figure out how I could go to a meeting at church and come home at 2:30 in the morning drunk as hell. It's because I can't leave a bar, that's why. We'd have a meeting at church, and we might stop to have a beer or two to talk a few things over. Within about a half an hour, all the guys I walked in with are on their way home to their families. And I can't leave. And I could never figure out why that happened. There were mornings I'd wake up and say, how the hell did that happen again? Because I knew that I never walked into a bar with the intention of doing anything else than having a couple of drinks and going home. I never walked into a bar and said, I'm going to get drunk. That's just not how I drank. I'd have a drink and then I'd get drunk. But it was never the plan. And then I don't know, it was my capacity or my whatever it was, but I never really thought I was drunk until towards the end, where I knew I wasn't walking right, or I knew I could, or I passed out on the living room floor on the 28th of December in 1982. No, it had to be a couple of days before that, because the 28th is my sobriety date. It might have been the day after Christmas. We're having a conversation before a meeting. not more than a few months ago. And I mentioned my sobriety date. So I said, wow, you got to go through New Year's Eve sober. I said, yeah, we still had the party. It was, and I was bragging about how I didn't drink at the New Year's Eve party. And then someone was saying, well, it came, it was St. Patrick's Day. Somebody was saying, hey, he got sober on the 16th of March. And, somebody said, that must have been a hell of a St. Patrick's Day. And it dawned on me, this is at 35 years sober. And I leave that meeting thinking about that conversation about getting through New Year's Eve. And I never once in 35 years thought about what that Christmas was like for my family. Yeah. So it's important to keep coming back. You're always going to learn more things that you need to learn. My sponsor used to, he always said, people would accuse me of talking too much. And he says, sometimes some of us have to keep talking because sooner or later we're going to say something we need to hear. And that's been true for me, but it's always, it always turns out to be stuff I heard from somebody else, and I'm just recycling it. And all of a sudden, it makes sense to me. All of a sudden, I understand something that I should have understood years before. That's just, that's what AA is all about. It would be so easy if we could just, come in here, learn the steps. See, another problem I had. I walked in here from another 12-step program, so I knew the steps. I've been through a whole lot of step meetings. My sponsor was writing a 12 and 12 for Gamblers Anonymous. So he was not someone that was shied away from the steps. And so I came in here with the attitude that I do everywhere else a lot of times, that I knew at my first meeting I could never say my name without saying I'm an alcoholic, because that's what you did. And if you didn't do that, then everybody wanted to shake your hand and talk to you after the meeting. So I called myself an alcoholic long before I knew I was an alcoholic, or admitted I was an alcoholic. I didn't do that till I was years sober. I woke up one morning, I said, damn, I'm going to drink today. I know I'm going to drink today, and I don't know how to stop it. I was curled up in a ball. I said, I says, I've been doing everything they told me to do, and now I'm really feeling miserable. I remember that morning I asked God to help me stay so. I said, God help me. I'd never said that before. But a year sober, I said, God help me. And it worked. Because I not only said, God help me, I said, God help me, and I don't care how you choose to do it. I'd spent my whole life in church and all kinds of other places, asking for help, screaming for help, begging for help, crying for help. And nobody had the help that I thought I needed. Someone would say, well, why don't you get a real job? I said, how is that going to help? I like what I'm doing. Well, why don't you stop drinking? Like, that's going to help. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Here's $50. Now that helps. But I had this relationship with God that He was supposed to know what I needed because I knew what I needed, and He was supposed to deliver it. And it just didn't work out that way. And I'm glad. Because the last thing I ever wanted God to do for me was show me who I am. And Alcoholics Anonymous and God, as I understand Him, have done that for me. Today I know who I am. I know who I am everywhere I am. I no longer have to carry 5 personalities around with me so that I can open them up depending on what door I walk through. I don't have to be one person at home and another person at church and another person at, anywhere. Because you drink too much, you start forgetting what personality you're supposed to use in what place. And sometimes you start mixing them up, and that gets kind of crazy. I'm not sure what the worst combinations are, but I know the church personality at the bar didn't work, and the bar personality at church certainly didn't work. And AA has allowed me to walk through any door in the world and not have to be anything different on this side than I was on the outside. And that's a freedom I never could have imagined. If I walked in here looking for freedom, I thought I was coming here looking for a sentence. I was looking for punishment. I was looking for, my life was ruined. I never expected freedom out of this. But that's what I've got. And it's also the freedom, like I said, to always be learning something new about me, about all kinds of stuff. This is a spiritual program for me. This is where I get my spirituality. This is, as far as God as I understand Him, I prefer not to. Because when I thought I did, it got me nothing but trouble. When I thought I knew what he was supposed to do, it didn't work. I know what I'm supposed to do today. I'm supposed to not drink. I'm supposed to help another alcoholic. I'm supposed to treat people like they're worth something to me because today they are. I'm supposed to be a different person than I was when I was drinking. And I'm not too bad at that today. There are times. I spent about a year and a half, a couple of years ago, I wasn't getting hired at any meetings at all. My wife had some problems, and I just didn't want to leave her alone. She passed out on me a couple of times. So I started hanging close. And I would find, I just gradually was dropping off my meetings. Initially, because I thought I was doing the right thing. The trouble is, when we start making excuses, or if we have a legitimate reason for missing a meeting or two, and we start letting it become an excuse for missing 10 or 15 or 25, we're doing something wrong. Because the only thing that makes me valuable to my wife at all are the things I've learned here. She knows what I'm like when I don't go to meetings. So I started coming back. I was sitting in front of the computer playing a bunch of, watching a bunch of wheels go around on this slot machine on a computer. And it dawned on me that she was in the living room. She was all right. And I'm sitting here doing nothing. said to myself, it's an inventory I've taken all my sobriety, is if I'm an alcoholic, and I realize that the only real gift that God has given me that I can really use is to help other alcoholics by sharing my story. There's no alcoholics in this house except me. And I can't keep, just sitting here talking to myself and thinking things, that I'm helping anybody. That's when I started, that's when I had to run back to meetings. Because that's what this is all about for me. People that come in here, I've sponsored a few people. I co-sponsored lots of people. And I've seen a lot of people come in and go out of these doors. Some come back, some don't. Some don't because maybe they don't have to. Some don't because they're not alive anymore. But it seems that when we get into the steps, especially into the 4th and the 5th, the 8th and the 9th, all those steps that make us look inside and make us really examine the stuff that we're all about. That's scary stuff. And you better be around people. When you're ready to do that, you have to be around people, I think, that have gone through that and are willing to tell you that it scared the hell out of them too. They found stuff about themselves that they never wanted to know. But they can't stay sober without knowing. And the great thing about that is that sooner or later, the light comes on, and you get enough of that garbage out, and you want to throw it away. Some people will tell you to throw it away. I kept mine. Because that garbage is the one thing I have that can help another alcoholic believe that he's in the right place. I got sober from it. It's about time I thank Mark for asking me. Thank you for listening. And join the Lord's Prayer. Good job. Who's Father?
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
I'd like to thank you, Tom, for your lead. You did a good job today. This wasn't where you thought you belonged.